burn this place to the ground.
We got our first look at Marvel's Disney Plus shows during this big game. Are you excited? Are you? I'm excited. The ad is only 30 seconds, but contains lots of clues and mysteries about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, WandaVision, and Loki. Yes, even the one shot of Loki contains a huge Easter egg about this series. So let's start off with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The opening 2 shots show Sam practicing with Cap's shield after Steve handed it over to him in Endgame.
How does it feel? Like it's someone else's.
Now this is showing that he's not yet ready to take on the name and that he's unsure of himself. So a big part of this series is probably going to be about him stepping away from Cap's shadow to embrace the name for himself. Now this location is interesting too. A lot of weeping willows, there's mist coming out of the woods like he got up in the early morning to practice. To me, this looks like a southern location, like he went somewhere to get away from it all and train. Now notice the Marvel Studios logo switches from red to blue. This is pretty clever. All the movie intros are on red, but Disney Plus's design is based around the color blue. So this will be an easy way to differentiate the two kinds of Marvel properties, movies and TV. After all, a red-blue division worked great for Raw and SmackDown. Then there's a brief shot of Falcon chasing these guys in flying squirrel suits. Their color scheme looks a lot like a classic Hydra uniform from the comics. Now, if you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which may or may not be connected to the MCU anymore, you know that Hydra's been defeated for the last time about 3 times now. So it's not out of the question that they could return again. It's kind of their thing.
If they cut off one head, 2 more shall take its place.
And this is the first live-action look at Sam's new costume. Now we've seen it in concept art before. Notice the pointed red triangle in the middle like a falcon's beak. But you also notice he doesn't have the shield here. Now this could be for 2 reasons. One, he doesn't feel ready for it yet. That's why he's dressed more like the Falcon with no Captain America symbolism on his uniform. Or the shield could have been taken from him. Now more on that in a second. Then we get a couple shots of Bucky holding a gun to Zemo's head. This would actually be a huge moment for Bucky. He would hate Zemo for controlling him and then using his past to dismantle the Avengers, which ultimately led to half the universe being snapped away. But this is actually a moment for Bucky to prove that he's not a murderer. And that's exactly what he's showing in the next shot, letting bullets fall from his vibranium hand. Marvel's already revealed that Zemo is going to be in this series wearing his comics accurate mask. Now I'm wondering if we'll get to see him escape from the raft. Like maybe Thanos' snap wiped out a ton of guards and that's how he was able to get away. But there's another possibility. In the comics, Zemo is the leader of the Masters of Evil, a villain team that's like the anti-Avengers. But at one point in the comics, all the heroes were sucked into another dimension, and Zemo created the Thunderbolts. They were a team of villains pretending to be heroes. So I'm wondering if, since the Avengers are pretty much disassembled, Thunderbolt Ross asked Zemo to form a team that he can control, and then they named this group the Thunderbolts after Ross. A potential recruit for this team appears later in the trailer, and I'll talk about him in just a second. But first, let's talk about the show that I'm most excited for, WandaVision. Man, this is about to get weird. WandaVision is going to be loosely based on 2 comic book series. The Vision and the Scarlet Witch is about the 2 of them leaving the Avengers to settle down in the suburbs. And the brilliant series Vision is about the hero building a family of androids and trying to settle in the suburbs. I don't think the series is going to literally follow either of those stories, but it's going to borrow from them. So let's talk about these weird visuals and what they mean for the show. We see them appear in an amalgam of old TV sitcoms. First, there's these black and white series. The set is modeled directly after the 60s sitcom The Dick Van Dyke Show. But the 2 of them are dressed much more like a 50s sitcom family like the Cleavers or the Osmonds. Notice the Vision is wearing a sweater like Ward Cleaver, and Wanda is wearing pearls like June Cleaver.
Which was the style at the time.
These 2 shots, where Wanda is looking very 70s and very pregnant, are from the Brady Bunch. The staircase is a dead giveaway.
Hey, you guys.
This one is not from any sitcom kitchen that I can think of, and I know a lot about sitcoms. It seems like an amalgam of Roseanne, Family Ties, or Different Strokes. And I say Different Strokes because her outfit reminds me of Kimberly from that show. And then this room seems to most closely resemble the sitcom Family Ties. Notice there are 2 pacifiers popping up into shot with a comedic sound, and Wanda looks shocked. And in this one, she's wearing a comic-accurate costume, standing in front of a staircase. All right, so what do all of these mean? Well, this series is probably going to be about resurrecting the Vision after he died in Infinity War. But, as we found out in Endgame, his consciousness is still connected to Wanda. She can feel him.
You know, I wish there was a way that I could let her know.
She knows.
They both do.
Remember, both of them are linked through the Infinity Stones.
I think if it were exposed to a sufficiently powerful energy source, something very similar to its own signature, perhaps.
So this dialogue
I just feel you.
I just feel you.
was literal. They felt the presence of one another through the stones. So the Vision spirit is still connected to Wanda through her powers. And her powers are, well, she's weird. In the comics, she has the ability to alter probability, which later evolved into an ability to rewrite reality. And in the MCU, she seems to take her powers from the ether, the reality stone, judging by the red gooey energy burst she can throw around. So in the MCU, Wanda could have the ability to alter reality and bring back the Vision. I think that what we're seeing in these sitcoms is an episode by episode evolution of their lives, presented through the lens of a warped reality. Maybe, growing up in Sokovia, she watched a lot of American sitcoms as a kid, so that's how she's perceiving this relationship. So let's walk through it. In the 60s, they get married. In the 70s, she becomes pregnant. Then in the 80s, they have twins. And this is a huge connection to the comic. She and Vision actually had twin boys in the comics, even though he's an android.
How would that work?
It works.
But later it turned out that she imagined them into existence, she went insane, and then destroyed almost every mutant on Earth. We also know that she's going to appear in Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. And a couple of years ago, Kevin Feige said this about Wanda. Her powers, she's never had any training. I'm talking about Scarlet Witch. She never had any training, she's figuring it out. Now notice how surprised she looks when she appears in this reality in modern day clothes. She's not in control of these events and she's struggling to maintain her sanity. So what if at the end of her journey, she embraces her identity as the Scarlet Witch and becomes an actual sorceress? Then she appears in Doctor Strange as his pupil as he's teaching her how to use her powers. But the supervising producer of the show also said,
so much of the fun in watching the show for fans will be the unexpected discovery of where and when in the MCU this series takes place and how it all fits into that larger picture.
So maybe I'm wrong? Maybe all of this takes place in her head during the events of MCU past. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. But now, let's get back to Falcon and the Winter Soldier and the real villains, the US government. This shot of a marching band on a football field is the MCU debut of John Walker, played by Wyatt Russell. Now in the comics, Walker was a good old boy patriot from the South. In fact, his first superhero name was Super Patriot. But he was kind of an a-hole and publicity hound, so he was more the anti-Steve Rogers. But when Steve first walked away from Captain America in the comics so he could dress like this, the government chose John Walker to be the new Captain America. And that's just what's happening in this series. The government doesn't want a random guy like Sam to walk around as a symbol of America. They want to control Captain America. So they recruit John Walker. Now notice he's being introduced to a crowd. There's cameras, there's dancers, a big production. Kind of like the USO shows in First Avenger. In the First Avenger, the government wanted to use Steve as a propaganda tool, and that's exactly what John Walker is. Someone they can control in front of the cameras. Now notice how the band leader is dressed with the same A as Walker's suit. Like a whole marketing team put together this design. So Sam not only has to prove to himself that he can be Captain America, he has to prove it to all Americans. And remember, Steve isn't dead. Old Cap can still appear in this series as a mentor figure to Sam. Oh, and if this dancer looks familiar, it's because she's appeared in the MCU before. That's your mom. Anyways, here's a random theory. Maybe Falcon and the Winter Soldier will end with them using Banner's time machine to make Steve young again. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Now let's talk about Loki. This series follows the version of Loki that disappeared with the Tesseract in Endgame. So technically, he's a Loki from a different timeline who never reconciled with Thor in Ragnarok. This is what Marvel has already said about the Loki series.
There's a huge time travel component. There'll be a man on the run quality to it.
So who is he running from? Well, this one scene in this trailer gives us a big clue. He's wearing a jumpsuit with the letters TVA, which of course stands for the Tennessee Valley Authority, the New Deal agency that provided electric power to millions of people in the southern United States and lifted them out of poverty. Or it could be a reference to the Time Variance Authority. This is an organization in the Marvel Comics who police the time stream and the multiverse to make sure nobody causes too much damage. Or, like Captain America said,
Clip all the branches.
think of them like the Time Masters in Legends of Tomorrow or the Department of Temporal Investigations in Deep Space Nine. In the comics, every agent in the agency looked like Marvel writer-editor Mark Grunwald because he was the person in charge of keeping Marvel Comics continuity straight. And that's just what the TVA's job is, to keep the timeline from being fractured.
Your time is all ripped up to hell. You broke your time twice. How did this happen?
In Avengers Endgame, the Ancient One explained that every time the Avengers time traveled, they created another reality in the multiverse. All of those realities are returned to normal after Cap returned the stones. Except, Loki got away. So he's the wild card in all of this. So because Loki is now a man out of his place in the time stream, the TVA would want to erase him to make sure he doesn't further disrupt the timeline.
Don't someone mess with time. You don't with time, mother.
In this series, Loki could be using the Tesseract not only to teleport, but to travel to different universes. The multiverse is coming to the MCU. It's going to be featured in Doctor Strange and the animated What If show. In fact, notice how the logo's letters change between different time periods, or how in the original announcement there's a plethora of L's, O's, K's, and I's. I think this is indicating that Loki will be traveling to different dimensions and or different time periods. Now, if Loki follows through on his promise here,
I'm gonna burn this place to the ground.
that could have huge ramifications for the MCU. If he destroys the TVA and they can no longer police time, it opens the door for a time-traveling villain, like Kang, to invade Earth. What do you guys think? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For Screen Crush, I am Ryan Airy.